Welcome everyone, and hello Emanuele, how are you?
Fine, thank you. It's a very marvelous day. Not exactly sunny here in the Netherlands, but
Well,
I suppose that anything more than 19 degrees is well accepted here, as long as
that
it's not
seems
the 35 degrees that I hear. It's the average temperature in Italy and other part of the world.
indeed, yeah, that sounds like a normal day in the Netherlands. I do remember the quite often rainy days. Whenever I used to see a sun shining through my window, I used to have the best day. So it sounds like a normal day. I can give you some sun from here in Dubai because it's way too hot here. I wish I was in Italy or in Romania right now. Much more bearable. Even 35 sounds like heaven right now. But
Yeah.
yeah,
You pay for the absence of taxes, I suppose.
true. That is very well, very good benefit of being here. Not gonna lie. Well, we did post the Hedger article today, so I hope everyone had the chance to check that out. It's quite packed with a lot of information about the capability of Hedger and what exactly Hedger is, being a first of its kind privacy engine for our DuskEVM layer, application layer. A couple of questions did arise around it, not as many as I expected. So this might be a quicker hangout than I thought, but maybe we could go into some updates or other topics afterwards.
Sure. I'm here to answer questions. I came to appreciate the weekly appointment with the community. I think it's actually a much better format than me randomly taking questions on Telegram. Although I had to say that I'm also getting a little more active on Discord, although in some kind of dedicated and focused chats.
Yeah, I think it's great, and the community is really appreciating these weekly check-ins. Someone says that these are a bit more personal in a very good way. So
because I also do appreciate basically the direct interaction, the questions, and the participation too. Anyways,
certainly,
so start.
let's get started. So a couple of questions which did arise. So the first one is. This one is not around Hedger, but it is about Nocturne. Is there any information on external usage of Nocturne besides Sozu? We noticed that the team is not using the public testnet.
No, we tend to use the public testnet primarily for community and other kind of projects. At the moment, there isn't much activity on it because essentially we are moving the application layer on the DuskEVM. So there is, unless basically somebody has an idea that pertains to what is called DuskDS, so that Dusk data and settlement, previously called the layer 1. Then that is Nocturne is the place to test these applications. But so far, the only application that is close to the utility of DuskDS is indeed Soju, and so it makes sense that they are testing there. A lot of development is done on different other networks that are more dedicated. Like for instance, the development that is done on DuskEVM right now, or the integrations that we are doing with the first application that we are going to spawn. Eventually, all of these are going to be moved to a public testnet, but at the moment we are actually very focused, and we are very concentrated, and our goal is to ship stuff as soon as possible. So we took the decision to just make sure that we have an environment at work that we can test on and that we can iterate on very, very fast. And of course, when you have a decentralized network, then the organization of decentralized network, even on a test net, it's not as immediate. If you have to reset things, for instance, or if you have to make different kind of fixes on the go, and you have to stop and monitor everything that is happening, auditing the ledger and so on and so forth, it's actually a little more cumbersome to use a public testnet for it. So yeah, so that's I think that is my answer to that question.
Yeah, that's pretty clear, and that also answers a couple of questions regarding on why we're using a private repo for DuskEVM, and basically the answer to that is just a faster environment to test on.
Everything is about speed at this point in time.
Yeah, got it. Thank you. The next one was so. One thing I was pondering while brushing my teeth is this: in a permissionless system, I could potentially just make a bridge to bridge any asset, maybe a complementary security token to anywhere, and then my wrapped token on the destination chain need not be a security token at all, free access, etc. How does this sit with regulators? Do they care, and does it need to be controlled with whitelists?
So this is a very good question. This is a very interesting question, and as a matter of fact, this it allows me to unveil a little bit my my thoughts and our plan for the near future. So to speaking in regulatory terms, right? There are two different things to keep in mind that pertain to this very question. The first thing is what regulators regulate, where do they act, and a lot of it is it has been explained already, but it is very relevant for the MiCA regulation. And you can draw a parallel with the MiFID regulation, right? So what happens in MiCA? In the MiCA regulation. The MiCA regulation basically regulates two things. Regulates stable coins, and it regulates the access to certain particular institutions, certain particular service providers, which are called the crypto asset service providers, right? So you might have heard about the fact that USDT, for instance, Tether, is not accepted from a regulatory standpoint. Does this mean that Tether is forbidden? No, it's not. It means that CASPs are forbidden to list Tether. But what are CASPs? CASPs are centralized institutions. They are centralized service providers. And these centralized service providers, they provide some services to the community, to investors, to token holders, to a number of different clients that they have. So strictly speaking, in a decentralized world, there is no way to stop Tether, right? To stop USDT. What is controlled, what is KYC'd, what is where the regulators really act, is on the CASP, on the crypto asset service providers. This means that people are free to exchange USDT with each other. So where is the problem here? Well, there is no problem. If you basically stay in a decentralized environment, then at that particular point in time, MiCA doesn't really forbid anything. There isn't really any way to forbid things, to be honest. And I think that the regulators understood that. If we draw a parallel to the security world, then a security is a little more complicated. It's a little more advanced of a concept. Why? Because a token, a crypto asset, essentially does not really give right to anyone. of future revenue, right? So whereas a security does, if you acquire a security, you essentially acquire a right. You don't only own something which might be in a digital form, you also own the rights that are indeed associated with that particular asset. So if you own, for instance, stock, or if you own equity, then you also have the right, for instance, to vote. You have a right to dividends. You have a right to participate into the governance. And this right is regulated by law, right? Now, if you wrap, meaning essentially, if you take this object, this asset, and you make it available on another network, for instance, so outside of the confine of a certain service provider, in this case is a regulated service provider, and this regulated service provider might be an MTF, multilateral trading facility, it can be a regulated market, it can be a broker, it can be a transfer agent, it can be a lot of different regulated institutions. These regulated institutions, they are very tightly linked to a certain environment where they extend their license. So for instance, on an exchange, that might be basically the DMZ, so the all the different kind of technological and digital means for users to be able to trade. Same with APIs, same with an app, or these kind of things. A decentralized network is no different. It's no different. If you have a network, and by the way, Dusk is the first network that is in fact completely, completely where a license, or a series of licenses, in fact, is extended by default. So Dusk network is seen by the regulators as being part of an institution. In this case, the institution is NPEX. And therefore, any assets that are on Dusk, they are automatically, they are automatically accepted. They are automatically capable of bringing these rights. If you bridge this asset somewhere else outside of Dusk, let's say on Ethereum, on Avalanche, on anything, any other protocol, then you are outside the confines, or the digital confines, of the institution that provides the license. This means that the regulators say, you can do that, but dear investor, or dear holder, or dear protocol, dear protocol management, keep in mind that what you're doing is not the same thing. What basically all the access that is granted is on a synthetic representation of some rights that live somewhere else, right? And these rights, they can only be claimed, they can only be exercised within the confine of the license itself, or the regulated space itself, in this case, Dusk. So it means that if you have, another application on another protocol, for instance, that has access to the bridged assets, so these wrapped assets, basically, either this application has some kind of license extended by an institution. In that case, basically, this transfer of asset must also be regulated according to what MiFID and the regulations say in terms of transferring assets, or the assets is essentially just a representation of something that lives somewhere else. And therefore, it doesn't really give any claim, it doesn't really give any right. So, from a regulatory standpoint, this is what is happening. So, regulators do not really concern themselves with the decentralized part, and in this case, with the technical environment, or outside the confines of a certain licensed entity, unless there are mischievous claims or there are fraudulent claims from somebody that says, if you buy these assets, the wrapped assets, you're buying the real thing. If somebody says something like that, basically they are misrepresenting the asset itself, and basically they are liable in front of the law. Same with protocols that allow for, the trading of instruments that are deemed securities without having a license. I think that this summarizes.
Yeah. Okay, that makes much more sense. I wasn't entirely sure there as well into what exactly do regulators actually look. So that brings more light, shines more light into the whole.
There is another thing to be said. There is another thing to be said about this specific question. So normally in Web 2, for instance, or in traditional finance, there isn't really the possibility to, just take a certain digital asset and bring on some other database, right? So say that an asset lives on Euronext, it's
Right.
not very feasible to basically extract these assets and to put it on my own application, in my garage, on my servers, something like that, right? This is a problem that pertains specifically to decentralized protocol. Why? Because assets live autonomously on a decentralized protocol without really being confined anywhere. And because of that, regulations or regulators are in fact sort of trying to catch up with the overall system. But since MiCA and since the formulation of MiCA, there is a little more clarity in the space.
Yeah. Now they have a little more structure and framework around how blockchain actually works, and since it's much more different than what you can do in Web 2, right, with the assets. Okay, that was a pretty good answer. Now, the next one is getting into Hedger. So considering the statements on one hand that Hedger is nonetheless delivers complete transactional privacy and holdings amounts and balances remain fully encrypted end to end, and on the other hand, although Hedger provides transaction confidentiality, it cannot provide the same level of anonymity as Zedger due to the EVM being account-based model. Is there still a difference in privacy capabilities between the two? And if so, what is the difference? Considering the first two statements, they don't see how the account is the differentiator.
Well, when we are talking about privacy of the payload, so what is inside of the transaction, then the privacy guarantees of Zedger are similar to Hedger. There isn't really much difference there. When we are talking about anonymity, Zedger works together with the Phoenix transaction model. The Phoenix transaction model is an output-based model. It's basically about banknotes, right? It works like with banknotes. If you find a banknote on the street, you have no idea who placed it there, right? Simple as that. So you take it. Now this banknote is yours because you have it, but you have no idea where it is coming from. And still, this might be a very good, a very legitimate way to pay for something. I live, for instance, in Italy. I can pay for a coffee to somebody else that will come. I do not know who that guy is, and the guy that basically gets the coffee doesn't really know who I am. I just simply say to the barman, "Hey, the next one that comes and wants the coffee is offered by me." Sometimes this happens in Italy. I've been doing it myself a couple of times too. I'm generally in a very good mood. This is an output-based transaction model, right? it's not that I do need to know the identity of somebody, or rather the entirety of the system. The barman, in order to intermediate this transaction, needs to know the identity of, me that leaves the payment for the next coffee, or the one that will, be the beneficiary of this free coffee, right? This is an output-based model. The mean of it is a fungible currency, which are banknotes, fungible money. Whereas if I am actually making a wire transfer to somebody, then the bank establishes that I do have this money because of my identity. So my identity is linked, or my account, better, is linked to a certain balance. And therefore, if I have zero on my balance, the bank will stop the transfer. If I have some money on my account, then they will facilitate the transfer, but they need also to know whom I am transferring to, right? So in this case, this is an account-based model. So it's not really based on banknotes or better outputs. It's based on an account, on what I do have. Knowledge of what I do have is essential to facilitate this transaction. So because of that, then I can conceal my identity behind a pseudonymous. Say, for instance, that my bank doesn't really know who Emanuele Francioni is, but knows Autolycos, right? So if you do not know that Autolycos is me, then you just see Autolycos, and you might think, okay, this Autolycos guy is transferring money to somebody else. If at some point somebody makes the link and the connection that Autolycos is me, then basically that pseudonymous is, it doesn't really conceal my identity anymore. So pseudonymity is the best you can do in an account-based model. And in some other cases, you can work around it a little bit. You can have several different pseudonyms and several different kind of things, but all these plausible deniability is actually quite easy to bypass and quite easy to solve by any kind of serious monitoring system or serious cryptographer. And Hedger is basically, and I would say even an evolution of Zedger, but Zedger needs, in order to protect the anonymity, it needs Phoenix. It works with Phoenix, whereas Hedger works with the account model, so it works with the EVM and all the account-based systems.
Yeah, exactly. And from my understanding, Hedger at the moment will be able to hide the holdings, balances, and amounts, but it wouldn't hide the identity of that transfer, right? So the actual account, or this could be done using pseudonyms, like you mentioned.
Well, so the pseudonymity is going to be there, but pseudonymity doesn't really protect anyone's identity. As a matter of fact, I mean, if you go to any kind of if you go on the Ethereum ledger, then there are people that even link their account to some name which is which leaks their identity, and they do it on purpose, like with ENS, for instance, the Ethereum naming service, which according to me is not only completely useless, but it's also kind of a mean for surveillance. But to each their own.
Yeah,
there are capabilities, there are possibilities, for instance, to make the pseudonymity a little more tight, but again, it's if you really want to conceal your identity, then you do need anonymity.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, at the end of the day, unless someone knows that account, that wallet is tied to a specific person or company, they would need this prior knowledge of this account is linked to this person or this entity for them to actually know that they are related, right? So you could see a transfer on chain, with hidden amounts and balances, but that doesn't mean that you know who is sending the amount to who, because you don't know the identity behind that, ENS.
You do not know the identity, but you do see what account is using what. Whereas on Phoenix, for instance, this information is not leaked. It's not shown. You can never very easily understand what kind of wallet is performing what transaction.
Right.
So it's a level of privacy which is higher because it conceals everything. And we also introduced with Phoenix 2.0, we also introduced the capability to actually encrypt a sender inside of the transaction and prove in zero knowledge that sender is in fact the wallet that is creating that transaction. And we did that so that if you want to reject that transaction, if you don't want to deal with somebody, you want to reject the transaction, you can actually send the funds or whatever it is. You can reject and get the funds back to the originator of the transaction. Hence, you bypass all sorts of different kind of class of problems, like for instance, mixing, which is a big no-no in money laundering. So, for instance, if I would put some other address is your address on a transaction, right? So I can use a third party to reject my transaction and to send the transaction back to you. This is basically money laundering one-on-one. So we created inside of Phoenix 2.0, we created zero knowledge proof so that the originator that is encrypted can only be me, because I know the private key of a certain of the wallet that I'm putting in there. So if somebody rejects the transaction can only get back to me. And this was done after consulting not only regulators but also law firms in order to comply with the AML5 directive.
Yeah, that's amazing, and that's actually a very good way a very good continuation to the next question, which is related to Zedger, and is the question is the endgame solution still preferred to be Zedger, so ZK and UTXO, since account model, even with HE homomorphic encryption, has its limitations?
So the answer to that question is yes and no. So the no part is the fact that at the moment, since this is in fact, is probably going to be among the first applications that will, in fact, just do something on a decentralized ledger, on a decentralized protocol, in fact, protocol-wide with securities, then regulators are more interested in the correctness of the overall system, right? So they are more interested about the security of the system as a whole, about the fact that the system is not really, vulnerable, or that it works, and most importantly, that provides actual benefits to those that use this system, whether they are venues, regulated venues, whether they are investors, whether they are intermediators, brokers, what have you, right? And this actually, it's also interesting to mention that from their perspective, the fact that Dusk is, a small network at the moment, very ambitious, with a lot of ambitions, but at the moment is a small network, for them is a huge plus, because we do not represent a systemic risk or a systemic vulnerability that might actually bring down and make very big institutions collapse, like, for instance, would be the case with Ethereum. So they are a little more willing to work together with us, right? So because of that, then in this particular phase, putting out an application, as long as there is a minimum amount of respect and harmony with the current regulations, then they are very willing to work with us. So this is the no part. The yes part is basically about the fact that outside, and we do want to be very successful with this, right? So we want to grow. And let's say, for instance, let's take an optimistic view on this. So if we take an optimistic view, then we can think that we might actually be on the same kind of pathway of other protocols that at the moment they are doing quite well, like Ondo, like Centrifuge, like Mantra, for instance. They don't even have an entire network or an entire protocol. They have just one application. They have an application, and then they basically just offer a certain service. We not only aim to offer that service, we offer an entire protocol where these services are actually granted by default. So if we are good in executing on this plan, if we actually are following up on that, if there aren't really many hiccups and we are capable of delivering this on this vision, then at that particular point in time, Dusk is going to grow. It's going to become significant. It's going to become significant in terms of value that is held within the network. At that particular point in time, that is going to be the time in which most likely the regulators are going to be a little more attentive on all the different kind of dynamics of that network. For instance, the compliance or the harmonization with GDPR. And at the moment, there is this big gray area about the fact that pseudonymous accounts, wallets, may or may not be personal data. If they are, at the moment, it's, regulators are willing to let or to answer this question later on, when there is going to be a significant amount of value that is locked on Dusk. And then at that particular point in time, you better have a set of different tools that can indeed provide a much better, more compliant answer to these questions, right? And because of that, I do believe that Zedger is definitely going to be very, very important. And Hedger is sort of a gateway drug to that. Perhaps that moment never comes, because the regulators at some point in time might actually just have an interpretation of the GDPR law, might have an interpretation of DORA that says that pseudonymity is perfectly fine. At that particular point in time, then it's not a matter of regulation, it's a matter of features, right? So some organizations might actually mind the fact that there is anonymity, and they want it because they really do not want to leak their anything to the outside world, and it might not. And our vision has always been to provide complete privacy because of the ever moving and ever changing environment, which is also quite natural considering that blockchain still is at the very beginning of its journey, right? So it's a very fluid environment. Then, perhaps we have been a little too zealous in providing privacy all the way. So we had to weaken a little bit the privacy aspect in order to have a business, because at some point, if no exchange admit privacy preserving network, then it would be very difficult for us to operate to operate the business. Okay, I don't consider Dusk a business, as a matter of fact. I consider it a protocol, but still to operate the network itself, right? So that is roughly the explanation of what I do think about Zedger and Hedger, privacy in general, regulation, and the pathway and the trajectory that we are taking with Dusk.
Lovely. I think that makes a lot of sense. And that was actually the last question on my list, but I see there are two more questions in chat. And one of them is from guest number one. Is if assets on Dusk benefit from NPEX license, can NPEX be held accountable for assets out of their control on decentralized network?
If they are out of their control, then they are out of their control. By definition, it means that these assets are not NPEX assets, are not securities. They are essentially wrapped assets, because or representation of these assets. So
Right.
NPEX cannot, for instance, cannot be held responsible for if somebody at some point decides to do a derivative on some assets that NPEX does. It's, of course, NPEX is held responsible in case, for instance, Dusk crashes and burn and loses money for everybody. Then at that point, NPEX might have its own license revoked. But that's, that is basically the risk reward factor. In order for NPEX to be the first institution, the first regulated institution that in fact has a very intimate and symbiotic relationship with a decentralized network, then it's betting that the decentralized network works. And it not only works, but that people use it, and there are benefits, concrete benefits to be had there, right? So they are putting their license at stake for the vision, for the combined vision of NPEX and Dusk. What is the reward? Well, the reward is the fact that they will be the first institution to have unrestricted access to the overall DeFi ecosystem, and powering an overall DeFi ecosystem, being the first in the Netherlands, probably being the first in Europe too, and having control over the network itself. So being able to defend it in front of defend its choices in front of the regulators, and the capability also to accrue, gas transaction, to have its own cost reduced, and all that jazz. So that is their risk reward. But of course, they cannot be held responsible for something outside of the confines of their license and the network that they choose to operate on, which is Dusk. So they are responsible to, for everything that happens on Dusk, because it still needs to obey the regulation. But they cannot be responsible for assets that are breached to, I don't know, Solana.
Yeah, exactly. That explains it well. Thank you, Emma. The next one would be, are there institutions who have indicated interest but are also waiting for NPEX app to demonstrate how it works before committing to replacing their backend with Dusk? Are these institutions bigger than NPEX?
So the short answer is yes. But the but has got to do with the nature of these institutions. So institutions that are venues, they normally operate, or they want to see how the tokenization trend is faring. If it is a fad, if it is something that will stay, what are the the real advantages of getting on board. Now, the vast majority of the venues there, big venues, big MTFs or regulated venues, they do not really want to deal with decentralized stuff that much, because essentially that disrupts their own business. And therefore, there are a lot of different newcomers, new businesses that in fact are looking at decentralized, and we are in touch with many of them that are already looking or experimenting with DLT in order to tokenize assets. But the huge one, the behemoths, they're more interested in basically understanding first how these newcomers are going to fair. Their strategy has always been, since the 70s, let them grow and then buy them, but whether they become a threat or they become very profitable. That's basically what incumbents do. So that's the but part. The yes part pertains to other kind of institutions that are not venues, that are definitely looking into right here, right now, decrease their cost significantly. And those are certain particular asset managers that are order magnitudes bigger than NPEX, that would love to get on it, but first they want to see the first assets tokenized and used on the network, and they want to see how regulators react and what the advantages would be. So yes, we are definitely in touch with those. Those are primarily asset managers of a certain kind. They are also very big entities. And some of them you might actually even have an intuition about who they are. Those are normally those entities, those institutions that are betting a lot on a future where everything is tokenized. And there are many of these asset managers. But to be honest, yes, we are very interested in cooperating with these asset managers. We are definitely welcoming them. But to be honest, I think that it's actually much more a much better way for us, for Dusk, to deal with them via, so through different kind of institution. Why? Because these asset managers, these institutions in general, they don't really like to deal with technology providers. They want to deal with other institutions. And we see these over and over and over again, right? So one example is 21X. 21X has a lot of relationship with these huge asset managers like Apex, for instance, or UBS, right? But 21X is a venue. So is a venue that has a lot of different connections with a lot of different asset managers. And the model of that venue is B2B2X, where X are investors, right? So 21X, for instance, they do need a broker. They do need another institution that basically comes there, gets the asset, trade on the asset, execute orders on behalf of their users on their venue. They don't sell directly to retail. They do not make the products of this asset manager available to retail directly. What they do, they basically just cooperate with a broker, with a trading partner. That's how they called it, right? So for us, it's more interesting to actually deal with 21X. Why? Because by connecting with 21X, we get access to all these people. We get access to all these assets, offer at some point through a broker application, in this case NPEX, for instance, to retail. Who's retail? You guys, me, users,
Anyone.
community. That suddenly they get access to, money market fund or to Apex funds or this kind of big asset manager. They can get liquidity, they can get assets, they can get a yield, which is backed by these asset managers, or rather by the businesses that are these asset managers. And then we can do a lot of interesting stuff. We can create yield-bearing instruments. We can wrap this yield-bearing instrument. We can do a lot of different things, like interoperate with other network in order basically for liquidity to go from this network to an application, and then the asset being offered on Dusk, for instance. That's another thing that can be done, and a lot of different other applications. So the answer is yes, but I hope I provided good context for the yes part and the but part.
I think that did. I think that definitely did. And we are also trying to keep these sessions, somewhere between 30 and 40, 45 minutes. We're getting around that 45-minute mark. And I see that a bunch of questions have come up. And I wanted to ask you, Emma, if you want to take some of them now or if you want to save them for the next Hangout.
Let's do one, and then I need to go. But I'll take one last question.
Cool. Let's do it. So the next question would be, is the DuskEVM already integrated into the internal testnets or being audited in production-like conditions? Will it be on public testnet before launch?
Okay. The answer to this question is I don't know. Very simply put, I mean, this is a question that is probably best asked to Hein rather than me. But I can tell you that, first of all, we are not YOLOing anything in production. However, at the same time, DuskEVM is using a stack which has been consolidated for years by the good guys at Optimism, and therefore we don't read. We will be rigorous in our testing, of course, but I don't necessarily think that we do need a phase of decentralized testing. There will be a testnet available at some point for DuskEVM because we need, all the different kind of applications and application developers to be able to develop against it. But that's why we would have a testnet, not really to test with the community and everything before launching. But again, this is more Hein's turf than mine at this point in time.
Yeah, we'll try to get Hein on in some future Hangouts and answer some more questions on the technical side as well. But I think that answers the question in terms of what the question was around. That the community has been wondering if there will be a public testnet, so that kind of like a step in the process of getting to having DuskEVM live, which is not a prerequisite, and we are doing internal testing. So and public testing for that is not needed. And I think that provides all the question and info around that. Thank you so much, Emma, for your time. Again, these are very interesting.
Thanks for all your questions. Like I said, this is a space that I hope serves to provide a lot of perspective, but it's also good for me because I actually do like this this interaction with the community, and I think that this is a very good format for us.
Certainly. And don't worry, guys. I will, of course, I will save all the questions that you put during the live chat, and we'll answer them in the next Team Hangout next week. Same time on Tuesdays, 4 p.m. CEST. We'll be here. So thank you for everyone that tuned in. We will post the recording on YouTube shortly, probably tomorrow, and the summary will go out with that as well. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.